what endometriosis is, hold on. I have a uterus.
You haven't. You have. I'm sorry.
I have a uterus. I'm sorry. I have.
Stop. You just busted out a medical uterus, like one of those like doctor uterus things.
You know, they had one of these in my doctor's office, and every time we would
you
go,
steal
I
it?
would.
Tell me
I
you stole
wanted
it.
to. I made
it.
so many jokes, and I was like, I would tell my husband, he's like, "Don't you dare! He's the good one." So he bought me one.
All right. Well, Alexandra Hamrick, Allie, as your friends call you, it is good to have you on the podcast. I'm not sure when this will be posted, but as of this recording, we just released recently an episode on IVF with a leading embryologist and a theologian, Dr. Michael West and Dr. Jennifer Burr, talking about the importance of IVF, what it actually is, what it isn't. But even before that conversation manifested, you and I have been talking about having you on to talk about your very real and personal experience with IVF and now some of the advocacy that you do. So it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for making time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, you know, as someone who also has deconstructed, I don't know how much I believe in the whole everything happens for a reason, but I do believe that podcast episode, like I messaged you, came out before we talked for a reason. For multiple things. I think it helped you have a better understanding, and they explained things to you that I probably would have fumbled trying to explain. And to your audience, they were able to explain it from a really high level. And so hopefully people listen to that first before they listen to this conversation. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here and hopefully shed some light from an actual Christian IVF mom.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's just kind of start with that big picture story then, because a lot of your work on social media, that's how we connected, is around endometriosis and IVF, which are, you know, two major things for sure that people, I think, either don't know enough about, especially in the medical field, especially when it comes to endometriosis, as I've been learning. So what got you into kind of becoming known as an advocate for these things? What's the story there?
Sure. So at the time, a little bit about our background. My husband and I met at a church, at a mega church, classic Southern story.
Classic.
You know, we were both, you know, high level volunteers at the time.
I have to ask, was it a situation where you were running towards God as fast as you could and you looked over and there he was?
And there he was.
There he was. Yes.
There he was.
Classic.
The story is much funnier than that. I always say that he was very creepy and he inserted himself into a conversation I was having with one of our mutual friends. But yeah, I mean, you know, almost 10 years together and it's been great. But
turns out he's not a creep. He's not a creep.
He's not a creep. He's not a creep. He was a good one. He was a good one. But yeah, we started dating. I eventually went on staff at the church. So I was very, you know, deeply entrenched in this evangelical world and community. And we got married while I was on staff. And everyone was super supportive, of course, very excited for us. It was a big deal. When are you going to have kids? Well, we don't know at the time. I had not been officially diagnosed with endometriosis, but I am a third generation endometriosis survivor. So I watched my mother go through it. I started my period at a very young age. I was 9 years old. So, you know, for those parents watching, imagine your 9-year-old, you know, going through that. So it was something that was always in the back of my mind. My husband and I had a conversation early on in dating, as you do. Do you want kids? Yes. Do you? Yes.
Especially in that world, right? It's like on the list, you know, are you a Christian?
You got to check it off.
Do you want kids? Check. Okay. We can get married now.
Exactly. Okay. Second date now. Let's go. It's wild. It's so wild looking back. But my response was, I don't know, you know, and I told him really early on, because we met kind of later in our 20s. And I said, look, I have this condition. My mom had it. I'm an only child as a result of it. I don't know what that looks like for me. I want you to know that going into the relationship.
Right.
So 6 months after marriage, I have a cyst burst on my ovary. I think it's a UTI. I go to urgent care, have a great female doctor. Female doctors around the world detects that something else is wrong. I wind up in the emergency room. We're newlyweds. I mean, thinking I'm on birth control, for crying out loud. Like, you know, like we're just thinking we have all the time in the world. We're going to take 2 years to enjoy each other and travel.
Totally.
Hit us like a ton of bricks. I came out of that, went to my OBGYN who, you know, God's hand is in all things. I believe this was my mother's OBGYN as well. She's since passed away, but she was able to look at my situation and she was like, you got a couple options, they're not good. None of them are good. Let's be honest. These are your surgical options. Or there is an expert, endometriosis and fertility expert up in Jacksonville, Florida. She's in St. Augustine. I live in the in-between. And I said, what? Like here in our town? And she's like, yeah. And if you go to him, he can save your ovaries, but I can't. Okay, well, that kind of gives me the answer that I need. So we start going down this path, again, not really with IVF in mind. And so that's where my story differs, I think, from other people, is we were never really given the opportunity to try naturally and fail. And a lot of people, I feel like God spared us that heartbreak a little bit, because most people that wind up in the situation that we are in, they've had a lot of negative pregnancy tests before they even get to a doctor to tell them why. And there's a lot of heartbreak there. There's a lot of issues within the church there, and how we speak to women who are in those situations, how we speak to men in those situations. But there was a moment when my husband and I were at dinner, and I just remember him looking at me, and he said, I think this is your ministry. I think you have to tell people what we've been through and where God has met us. In science, right? Because it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Totally.
We can pray for healing and receive that answered prayer through an expert surgeon living 20 minutes down the road. What the heck? I mean, come on, talk about God.
Right.
And so that's really what led to me starting to speak about it. The more that I would post about it on social media, I would have women stop me in the hallway at work, again, at a church. Hey, I've been having this like crazy lower back pain, and everyone I talk to says it's just, it's in my head, but we've been trying to get pregnant forever, and we keep praying, and we keep doing this, and we keep doing that. Go to a doctor. Has anyone told you to go to a doctor? No, they just keep praying for me. Go to a doctor. Mm-hmm. And so my husband and I kind of found ourselves stumbling into this space of sort of being an advocate for medically answered prayers, so to speak, in this space of people that are seeking something and it's just not happening.
I think that's a good way of putting it, medically answered prayers. We've often said that, when you have anxiety, God can answer prayer in the form of a therapist or a medication, right? It's not just a magic wand and abracadabra. Right. Let's just define some terms so we're all on the same page. Sure. Endometriosis. What are we actually talking about? I have a very high level understanding of it. We have some friends who maybe have had things like that with them, but maybe for the audience and really for my own education, can you break down what this is and how it relates to infertility potentially, or fertility, et cetera?
Absolutely. So endometriosis is where there's a lining inside of the uterus called your endometrial lining. That's normal. That is what sheds every month when a woman has her period. It's very normal to be there, very normal to shed. What endometriosis is, hold on. I have a uterus.
You have an... You have? I'm sorry.
I have a uterus. I'm sorry. I have.
Stop. There's a podcast audience that has no clue what just happened. Friends, if you have time, go to YouTube to watch this at some point. You just busted out a medical uterus, like one of those doctor uterus things.
They have one of these in my doctor's office, and every time we would
go,
I would
tell me you stole it.
I made so many jokes, and I was like, I would tell my husband, he's like, don't you dare. He's the good one. So he bought me one. They're expensive.
Are they really?
Yeah, they're like $60. But anyway.
Oh my. Okay, I'm looking at on my bigger screen here. Go ahead. I'm watching. Go ahead. This is helpful.
So these little dots right here.
I do.
Right. So that is what is endometriosis. Okay. And so this is a really bad example because it's just the uterus. And a common misconception is that endometriosis only grows in the uterus, because for years, what was said is that this endometrial lining is endometriosis. Okay, so doctors just didn't understand that it was a difference. It's not the same. And there is evidence-based research. It is a well-accepted fact.
Are those dots, are those holes in like the lining, or what are they, little cysts or something?
Essentially, yep. So a lot of people will call them like chocolate cysts. Okay. So what they are is it is a tissue that is similar to the lining of the endometrial lining. It's a tissue similar to that, but it is not the same. And it infiltrates the body. And what it does is it grows these little tiny chocolate cysts that are full of blood.
They're full of blood.
Mm-hmm. And so when a woman is menstruating, and again, this is a very, very, basic explanation.
Sure. Right. Because you're not a doctor, right? To be clear.
No, I am a doula, but I'm not a doctor by any means. I
Right. Just
love
want to be
doctors.
transparent for the audience.
Yeah, I'm
right.
a fangirl. I'm a fangirl
Yes,
of doctors for sure.
I cheer them on.
Yeah, I love them so much. But essentially, it causes a lot of pain and it causes a lot of issues. And when these little chocolate cysts grow up here, like in the fallopian tubes, for example, it can mash the fallopian tubes together. So what's supposed to be like this, which allows the eggs to flow in and out, allows the eggs to get impregnated and fertilized. When you have endometriosis, they go like this.
Oh, okay.
So there are surgeons. So I had a fantastic surgeon. And when he went in and removed all of my endometriosis, he also went into the fallopian tubes and repaired some of that.
So they can actually go in surgically to remove those little chocolate, what did you call them?
Cysts. We'll just call them little cysts.
Yeah, little cysts. Yeah. And then they can also go in and so what you did was you held your hand up and you spread your fingers apart and then you close them, right? And when they're open, that's how you want things to be. When they're closed, that's not a good sign. So your doctor was able to go in and kind of open them up a little bit. Is that correct?
Yeah, think about jellyfish tentacles, right? You don't want them like squished together. You want them floating around, right?
Yeah.
But back to the disease. So that's what endometriosis is. And it's almost, I hate to make this comparison because I have close family that has passed from cancer, but it is almost, the disease acts like cancer in the way that it can spread to different organs and places in the body. And a common misconception in the past is that it was only found in the reproductive area, and that's not true. We now know that it has been found in the lungs, in the stomach, in the bowels, all over. And so, yes, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's
interesting.
Just, there hasn't been enough research on it, like a lot of diseases that are female focused.
Yeah.
There hasn't been enough research, but it's changing. It's getting better.
Can it be very painful as well? Like, does it create a lot of pain having those cysts and stuff?
It is one of the most painful conditions. Like the medical community recognizes endometriosis as being one of the most painful medical conditions a person can experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I say that to segue to this. Many women live their entire lives with that pain and without a diagnosis, without ever having anyone acknowledge that it's real, right? So I spent a long time thinking everybody feels this way. Like everybody has really bad cramps. Everybody has to call out of school. Everybody has to miss work. This is normal. But it's not. It's not normal. And it is one of the leading causes of infertility is endometriosis. And there's a link there, and there's something deep there, I think, for women, especially who grow up in the church. I would love to see a study done someday by someone smarter than me of what that correlation is of undiagnosed infertility and women who are raised in the church. Because I think we carry a lot of shame around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that has been, kind of my mission and my husband's mission is just to tell people it's just a medical condition.
Right.
Right. That's it.
Well, there definitely is. I mean, maybe my perspective taints this view, but not only in the church, but in culture, but definitely I think in the church, there is a very taboo nature when it comes to just normal bodily functions like periods and cramps and things that just happen to people, right? Like it happens. It's normal. We were kind of joking before we started recording, like, when you get married as a male, it doesn't matter anymore. Like what you thought might have been kind of taboo or icky or whatever. It's like, no, like it's just how my wife's body functions. It's designed to do what it does. And so it is interesting because there is, I think, this like taboo nature in general around sex and reproductive organs, et cetera, that already kind of put people behind the curve when it comes to issues that are not as normal, right? Like what you just said, endometriosis and the symptoms of that, et cetera. And then you think about like the medical system and how it's not really set up, I think, for women. Our first birth experience, my wife in particular, not a pleasant experience for many reasons. And that really taught her for the next one to really own her own journey and feel empowered and tell doctors no instead of just letting them do whatever they want without even asking her. So even my eyes as a man was really opened to how the medical system can treat pregnant women, et cetera, that I just wasn't aware of until you kind of see it with your own eyes,
Right, right. And that's a good perspective, I think, for other men that are listening who are in, a heterosexual relationship to be prepared going into pregnancy. And especially for those of you that are dealing with infertility, there are a lot of hurdles and there are going to be moments when you will need to advocate for your partner. And I'm not
Yeah.
talking about like the
Yes.
cute way, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
talking about like I'm getting in a doctor's face,
Right.
I'm making a phone call,
Yep.
like
You
you got
might
to
have
step
to be
up.
the asshole for a minute, and
You
for the
might.
sake of your partner, you gotta.
You have to. You
Yeah.
really have to.
Yeah.
And I know it stretches people outside their comfort zone. My husband is the sweetest, kindest, like pure sunshine man. No conflict, right?
Not
He's
a
in
creep.
sales
Not
for
a
a
creep.
not a creep, not a creep, not a creep, everyone.
No, right. No,
He's in
just fooling
sales
around.
for
Yeah.
a living, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
he loves people.
Likable,
But when it
relational.
came,
Yeah.
yeah, but when it came down to it, I saw him step up. And, that's one of the things that we try to tell people that, come to us for advice or for clients to just be prepared to advocate for your partner.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Prepare yourself now. Have those conversations with each other late at night, whenever it is. What do you want? Like, what do you want me to do in these moments? How
Yeah.
can I be there for you? Make sure you're on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Sarah created a birth plan for our second one, and she wants to be a doula one day, if you can't tell by now,
Good.
but
She should. She
she's
should.
honestly, she'd be perfect for it. But she had a birth plan. We had an amazing midwife who was an all natural midwife who's like she delivered like 1,000 something babies, over the course of her career. She was
Amazing.
wonderful. We loved her. And she was a great advocate as well. Like, she's so trusted by the doctors. The doctor wasn't even there in the hospital. He was like, okay,
Wow.
so-and-so, I see you're in here. Good. If you need me, give me a holler. And that was a night
That's a
and day
dream.
experience for her compared to the first one. So yeah, anyway, I know we're a little off the topic right now, but I recommend to anyone out there who's pregnant, create a birth plan, know your rights, own that journey with your partner, make sure you're prepared, because the medical system, and again, I want to clarify. I want to clarify because I want to be careful. I'm not a medical expert. I am not disparaging the entire medical system. Okay, there's a lot of good that happens. I will say I noticed in my experience with my partner that the system in my area, I'll be very specific, seemed to be set up to kind of get her in and get her out,
Yes.
and like get her in, get her to contract as soon as possible, get that baby out as soon as possible, whatever medication you need, whatever you got to do, because we need you out in 2 to 3 days at the longest. And if you are in labor any longer than this, we go to a C-section. We're like, no, we're not doing that. Right. So I noticed like this very factory almost feeling of just like, get him in, get him out, get him in, get him out.
It's a business.
And I was not a fan of how it made me feel. I'll just put it that way. It's not a conspiracy. I'm not saying the whole industry is that way, but that was my experience. I got to be careful, Allie, because sometimes right-wing commentators will take truths like that and be like, and therefore the deep state, they want control of your kids. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I noticed this when we had our
and
first.
I will back you up and say that was almost my identical birth experience.
Yeah.
And I had a doula. I hired a birth doula, which was, I think, my saving grace.
Yeah.
That and, so I had a 26-hour labor that ultimately resulted in an emergency C-section. During that emergency C-section, and I'll put a little trigger warning for anyone that doesn't want to hear this, just pause right now. During that emergency C-section, my OBGYN made a mistake and sliced into my bladder. So I began to bleed out on the table and had to have an emergency cystotomy. What was supposed to be a 45-minute surgery was 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
I woke up 4 hours later going, where's my baby? Like, where have I been? And a lot of that was the result of not being listened to early enough in labor. I was turned away multiple times. And, that's a story for another time. But I say that to echo any women who are feeling like, no one listens to me. Everyone tells me I'm crazy. You're not. There are amazing doctors out there. I got super lucky. My night nurse, we keep in touch. She's coming to my son's birthday. Like, there are medical providers out there that are a godsend, that are angels.
Yes.
But the point being, there is a discrepancy between those two things.
I also want to highlight too that there's even more of a discrepancy between white women and black women, right, who are pregnant.
100%.
Like, even the mortality
100%.
rates are higher. So like there's even that layer too, right? So I just want to acknowledge that, for the record of like even
Absolutely.
when it comes to race and other factors, right? gender, etc., the disparity could be even wider. So I think that's important to recognize. Okay,
it
cool.
is definitely and for those that are listening, I am a white woman, and I have largely benefited from that in my experience, and even still have experienced issues. So I can only have empathy and compassion and heartbreak for those that have experienced it worse.
Hi friends, if you're enjoying this video, I have a favor to ask. The New Evangelicals is a 501c3 nonprofit, and if you've looked around at all, you've probably noticed that we don't offer member subscriptions on YouTube or Patreon options. The reason for this is very simple. It's been our mission since the beginning to offer all of our content and community resources completely paywall free. What this means is that we are completely dependent on the generosity of people like you who donate to make this work possible and accessible for all. If our content has helped you, would you consider donating to keep it all going? You can find the link in the description of this video, and to be very clear, this is not about giving to God or something like that. We're not a church and this is not a tithe. The ask is so simple. If our work has helped you, would you be willing to help us make this content accessible to more and more people? All donations made in the US are tax deductible and every bit helps. Thank you for your generosity. Okay, so let's get back into your story then. So you discover that you're not able to get pregnant, essentially, is what your doctor tells you. Is that correct? Or like there's a big obstacle to getting pregnant. I'm not sure of the right verbiage, so forgive me. I'm
no, that is it.
Okay.
The factory is closed for business.
Okay.
It's not working. Okay.
Right. Got it.
So my doctor, there were several tests that he did. Ultimately, when I went up in the ER, he was able to see some imaging that gave evidence that I had endometriosis, because I knew that I had a family history that was on my side as well. It can be a genetic condition. So he said, okay, let's move forward with this testing. This is what I think you have. This is, I'm going to go ahead and diagnose you right now, and then we'll move forward. So that's what he did. We then moved forward with some different ultrasounds, other diagnostic tests that experts can do. I won't get into that here, but you can find me on my website, and I'm happy to explain it to you.
What is your website?
It is theinfertilitydoula.org.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And so ultimately he came back and said, look, I think you have stage 3, possibly stage 4 endometriosis. We think you at least have one hernia in your groin somewhere, and you're not going to get pregnant. You have a cyst on your ovary. We need to do surgery, period.
On the stages of endometriosis, is stage 4 the most extreme? Are there more stages? Where are we? Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes. So you're the most intense case.
Extreme.
Got
Correct.
It. Okay.
And just to be clear, stage doesn't always correlate with pain. Like someone with stage 1 could have the same level of pain as stage 4. What it relates to is how far it has spread in the body. So how many endometriosis lesions you have in the body. Okay. So he was saying, like, I think you have it everywhere, basically. Like I can see, like, you got a lot.
Right.
So we can do what's called an excision laparoscopy, which is it's a big deal. There are very few surgeons in the country that are skilled enough to do something like this. Again, we just got really lucky. So he did the surgery, 4 hours. Halfway through, a general surgeon came in and removed 3 hernias from my groin. He did a bunch of other stuff. I'm very open. I've posted my surgical records, like literally on social media. If you want to find them, you can find them, because I think it's important that people understand that there could be so much more to you not getting pregnant than just because you're not praying right. Like this was just not working. It just wasn't working. My uterus was not working. He did a lot, there was a lot that needed to be done. And I'm really thankful we had the resources to do it. The recovery process was pretty simple. 3 to 5 days, I was back at work, back on my feet. And then we were ready to move forward with the egg retrieval. Unfortunately for us, we went through the surgery at the end of 2019. And so what happened in 2020?
I don't know. Shut down. No idea what happened in 2020. Yeah. It's all a blur.
Literally a blur, just a blur. And everything got put on hold. Fertility treatments were paused, and then ultimately they were inaccessible altogether. And so we just kind of said, okay, we'll just put a pause on this dream for a while. We'll focus on surviving the pandemic.
Right.
During that, I had some significant changes in my career with my job, so it was a good distraction. And then in early 2021, we did our IVF egg retrieval, which was very successful, thank God. And then I got pregnant we did our transfer the end of 2022. and I gave birth to my son in August 2023. So for
Wow.
people to understand like the trajectory of IVF, it can be a long time span, right?
Yeah. So without IVF, your son would never be here, is what you're telling me.
Absolutely, 100%. We would never have gotten pregnant. My husband also was diagnosed with male infertility. He also, I mean, and again, not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but he did catch COVID during that year. He started to travel again a little bit for work towards the end of 2020. And when we were supposed to start the retrieval process, which includes him too, his sperm count went from okay to non-existent after he got COVID within 90 days. He was the first case that our fertility doctor had seen like that. He had to call a fertility clinic actually like on the other side of the world that they had seen male patients. So it was just, there's a lot of complications.
Yeah.
But again, we weren't alone. There were a lot of other people going through that at the same time. And it was just one more layer to the infertility. But because of that, our other option would have been IUI, which is something that I think people are a little bit more familiar with, which essentially is they insert the sperm into the vagina and allow it to do its thing. So it's just a little bit assisted, right? You're just kind of helping it a little bit. There's medication involved to help the woman's body, you know, some of those things. But my body, it never would have made it. Like we were not a candidate for that, right? And my doctor was super kind about it. And he was like, look, you can try if you want to.
I'm not going to stop you. Right.
But it's a waste of money. I've seen people do this. It breaks their heart. They do it over and over. They run out of money. They run out of energy. They break up. Like there's so many things that happen in this world. And he said, look, this is your best chance. And we said, we'll take it.
So IVF, my understanding is that it starts in like a petri dish, right? Like they do it there and then they implant once things have once the first few dominoes have fallen, so to speak. Is that, I mean, can you kind of explain the process, what it was like for you and what was going on?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, you know, and I would say if you're listening to this and you're confused, go back and listen to that IVF episode that you've already done, because it was such a beautiful explanation. And I am picky when I hear people explain it because I've heard it explained so many ways, but he did a really good job. And that's all it is really, right? So I took a lot of medication to help my body ovulate. Then I took some sedatives. They inserted something into my body. They went in and they extracted some eggs. They let them mature. Once those eggs were mature, my husband had already given his sample, right? And so then they just put them together. Now there are different layers of complication, and we'll say like expertise when it comes to that. There are some labs that, I mean, we're talking, they can really get down to the nitty gritty and like they're matching the sperm with the egg. I mean, it is very, very cool what they can do to help people because, you know, the intricacy of the body design is incredible.
Yes.
But so is science, right? And so to see the intricacy of the body design that maybe happened for you and your wife naturally in her body, but I get to see it happen like in a little petri dish, you know? And it's the same concept. It's still God's design. We're just helping it along a little bit. And so for us, in our case, we had to do kind of a step above because we had male infertility as well. So we did something that's called PIXI.
Okay. Yeah. I was wondering that. I'm like, okay, if there was a male infertility side of this as well, how does that work? So I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So essentially what PIXI is, the simple version of it is they just go into the dish and they take, instead of allowing the sperm and the egg to find each other. Yeah. They're just putting them together.
Right. They hold two little tweezers and go, okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. And they make like a little slice in the egg and they just, you know, they just help it out.
It's just amazing that like that humans have figured out how to do that, right?
It's wild.
To literally take one sperm and match it up to one egg and help it, you know, just like, it's just crazy.
It gives me goosebumps
that technology is there. It's
like,
wild.
Like an embryologist made my son. That's beautiful to me. Beautiful.
But
yeah, that's all IVF is. And then we wait for those embryos to mature. So for us, and it's a numbers game, and I'll give you my numbers just so people understand.
Oh, okay.
So we had 30 eggs that were retrieved, 30. Out of those 30, only 14 were mature.
Okay.
Out of those 14 eggs, we only had 5 embryos make it. Out of those 5 embryos, only 3 made it to day 5 maturity. So we went from 30 to 3, basically.
Wow. This is all still outside of your body? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So now we have 2 embryos left. One embryo is now my son, Harper. And we have 2 left that are frozen in storage waiting for our next transfer.
Okay, so that's a good point. So essentially, to really make it very simple, at some point, only a certain amount of embryos are viable. I think is that the word we're using here? They're
Correct.
viable embryos. Okay, and
Correct.
So if you have more than one, we can freeze the other ones, just keep them there, because if you want to get pregnant again, they can take that embryo and implant it to hopefully attach and actually mature.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct.
And as we covered in the previous IVF episode, these are not children. These are not. They haven't even split yet to become twins or not. Like it's not. We're not freezing children in freezers and just waiting to see what we're going to do with them. That's not what's happening here on a scientific level. I just want to reiterate that, because as we know,
and I'm glad you did.
Right-wing media, especially, there's one commentator. I'm not going to say her names. I'm just so exhausted tracking her. But like she has such a large platform, and she says, and I mean this truly, the most ignorant shit I've ever heard about stuff like this, and pretends that she's an expert. And she's not, which is why I am happy to say I love bringing on quite literally leading embryologists in the field to explain to you, the audience, what's actually going on. Because that's one of her talking points. It's like, we're just, we're essentially manufacturing babies in labs and just killing them off or selling them to people. That's not what is happening. It's a complete, it's propaganda, frankly.
It's propaganda, and it's propaganda that prevents other people from having children.
Totally.
And it sucks. And I will say, I do not know. And over the last 5 years, I have talked to so many people going through IVF or infertility from various degrees, most from a very religious background. Again, I was working in a church when I was going through this. And, not a single person said I was doing something wrong or sinful.
Right.
Not one. Right? Because I think when you talk face to face with other Christians, most people understand that this is, as you said in that episode, a pro-life endeavor. I'm trying to have a baby, right? And of all of the IVF moms that I've talked to, all of the IVF dads, all of the parents who have gone through this, we take this so seriously.
Totally.
And no one is like freezing baby. I wish, Tim, I wish it was as foolproof as freezing a baby. But the other 2 embryos that I have may never become babies.
Right.
The odds are against us. It's a 14% chance of success.
Wow. Yeah, so they're low. Right.
All of that.
Right.
For a 14% chance. Do you think anyone is doing that callously?
Right.
No.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I do want to ask you how it makes you feel when people who have very large platforms, who from one side of their mouth are like pro-family, have more babies, which, there's a lot of ties to other things going on there. But then we'll say about IVF, how it is farming children, how we're killing children. I mean, Al Mohler from the SBC, right, helped lead the SBC to make a statement condemning the practice of IVF. That's wild, considering how anti-intellectual and anti-science that statement is, given what's actually going on, as we covered in our previous episode on IVF and this one. How does it make you feel as someone who, because of IVF, gave you a son, a fully formed human being made in the image of God, right? Who I'm sure is beautiful and has both you and your husband's personality. And you look at them and you go, are you kidding me? Like, you want to stop this practice? So this person, my son's never here. How does that make you feel?
Ooh. I think the go-to feeling for a lot of us is anger.
Yeah.
And betrayal. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. My husband grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. Now, we've left that tradition, obviously, and most of our family has also left that tradition.
Totally.
But we have friends that are still there. And it felt like a betrayal. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And it felt kind of like, if I'm being honest.
Be honest.
Can I cuss?
Oh, fuck yeah, you can.
Okay.
There you go. I'll break the ice.
It was one of those things where I just looked back and I was like, if I could sit the pastors down that I grew up with and raised me and taught me this, I would love to ask them the question, just what the fuck? Do you actually agree with this?
Right.
And I have a pretty good feeling they would say no.
Right. I agree. I agree.
And that's the infuriating part, right? Because voices like me, like you, we're being drowned out. And it's harming people. It's harming people.
No, for sure. I mean, the the IVF thing is it's a weird position to take. And it is based
It
on a
is.
complete lack of understanding. Now, to be clear, I don't want to pretend that somehow I understand. I mean, I've interviewed leading scientists and people who have gone through the process, and I still am like, okay, I think I kind of grasp the idea. So I'm not
Right.
saying that like it's an easy thing to grasp. These are very complicated things. But to then not be able to grasp them, but then on top of that, spin complete lies and misinformation about the process while positioning yourself as an authoritative voice, I just think is so disingenuous and does so much damage. The only silver lining I see is that the person I'm thinking about who says this a lot, she routinely gets like destroyed by her own followers in the comments of like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a horrible take. But the reason why I'm concerned is because it doesn't matter, because people like her and Al Mohler, the Supreme Court in Alabama, have the power to regulate this stuff, right? They have the power to convince lawmakers to ban this kind of stuff or to whatever it is, seriously regulate it. And it concerns me because, to your point, it actually helps give people children. It helps them bring new humans into this world to pass on their legacy, of being of leaving the world better than they found it. So it's a very counterintuitive concept, but it seems to be kind of taking over, especially that like hard right Christian nationalist adjacent world right now. It's been fascinating to watch.
It is fascinating, and to be honest, I don't understand why. And when it all started happening, I remember, I have a morning routine. I get up, I'm a news junkie. I drink my water, I make my coffee, I sit down with the dog, and I watch the news.
Blueberry coffee, right? Blueberry coffee.
No, don't come at me with that.
Allie,
okay,
we're doing so good.
Look. I drank blueberry coffee in college. Okay, I can't drink it anymore, Tim.
Go back to your college days, Allie. Come on, live again. Come on, go back to those radical Christian college days.
Oh my gosh, that like took me right back to like my little Keurig with my little blueberry coffee.
I'm drinking it right now. It's delish.
Oh, I bet you are. No, sir. I've got my oat milk latte I made today. I'm good.
No offense, but that is such a white girl latte.
I know it is. I know. I own it. I know it is. God, I know. I try to be cool. I have a lot of tattoos to like try to give me street cred, but I'm not. I don't even remember what I was saying.
You were just saying like you don't know where it's coming from.
Oh, yeah. And so that morning, I remember I came down with my coffee and I turned on CNN in like big bold letters, IVF, whatever. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, it's 7 a.m. Like, what are you why are you talking about me on the news at 7 a.m. on like a Tuesday?
Who woke up and chose violence? No.
I was like, where did this come from? And I could hear my husband upstairs with our son, and I'm texting him. I'm like, they're talking about, our family on CNN. And he's like, what? And I have a group chat with a bunch of other amazing IVF advocates here in the state of Florida. And we're all messaging each other like, are you watching this? Are you seeing this? Like, just so angry that finally IVF like makes it onto the news, and like maybe we can talk about it, and maybe we can educate people, and maybe people can understand that it's an accessible option. No, we're going to talk about how it's killing babies.
Right.
What?
Right.
Like, no,
right.
We're trying to make babies? I don't understand.
Well,
it is
that's
so
actually
absurd.
a good question. I think maybe to end the conversation on is, are there advocacy groups who see what's happening and are like, not on my watch, not going to happen? Like, is there legal work being happening? Is it more of like public awareness about what IVF is and what it isn't? Like, what are some of the strategies being employed to kind of fight this massive disinformation campaign coming, frankly, from a very fringe group of people, but a group of people who have a lot of power and influence in their social circles?
They do. And that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. The number one organization I would encourage people to connect with is Resolve. So resolve.org. They are the leading national infertility nonprofit here. And so they are the ones that if you saw, a couple weeks ago when they were actually voting on the Senate floor about a bill concerning IVF, Resolve is the one that was really behind that. They were pushing it. They're the ones meeting with senators. They're the ones getting behind this. Every year in the early part of the year, usually in April, Resolve does something that's called National Advocacy Day. And you can sign up. Anybody can sign up to be an advocate. You go on their website, you register, and you spend all day, if you're available, meeting with lawmakers and meeting with mostly their aides, right? But talking to them about these laws and these bills that we are trying to pass and what those laws and bills are. Again, I can send you a link to maybe post and share with people because it's a lot to remember. But essentially, it's just providing national protection. All we want is something in place saying that state by state, a state cannot, like what happened in Alabama, cannot happen again.
Yeah.
That there's a national protection around IVF. Sure, states can make their own decisions about abortion. Unfortunately, that's where we are. But what we are saying is, look, we're not trying to put Roe back, although we wish. All we're asking for is for something in place nationally that just leaves us alone. Yeah. That's it.
Right.
There are other bills.
Don't tread on me.
Right. Literally.
Right? Okay.
But the Mary version, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other bills in place that I think are really positive too. Ones that provide our veterans and active military with more access to fertility treatment, because right now it actually states that their insurance will not cover fertility treatment unless it's an injury caused in the line of duty.
Interesting. I hate
which
that.
Is really shitty.
I hate it here. I hate it here.
Right? Like, how shitty is that?
So bad.
But like me working in like a marketing job, like I have insurance and I can go do it, but someone serving our country can't unless
Come on.
It's ridiculous.
People know on the show, I'm no fan of the military industrial complex, but if people are going to do that and put their lives on the line and be in that world, we should at least take care of them, right? And I think for me, like 101 is like, can we give them healthcare for life? Can we make sure that like their finances are taken care of, et cetera? And yes, that to me is a pretty much a no-brainer of like, that should just be part of the plan.
Right? Like, why not? Why not? Another bill that they are in support of is there are certain states in the country that have mandated insurance access or insurance coverage for fertility treatment. So if you live in one of those beautiful states, I believe New Jersey is one of those beautiful unicorn states.
I'm not surprised. New Jersey is a pretty progressive state here. So. You
got some good stuff going on there.
We do. We have trans right codified in the law. We enshrine abortion access into our law. Like it's a very it is expensive. The state's expensive, but we do have like great family health care that the state offers. That's really great. So I do love it here. And we don't pump our gas. Someone else does it for us.
Which is beautiful. I live in the armpit of hell, and you know who my governor is. So
where do you live?
I'm in Florida.
Oh, thoughts and prayers.
Yeah.
Let's just all say a prayer now.
Which adds another layer of the desperation, I think, for our advocacy down here, right?
Totally. But I actually have a question about that, because it seems like to me, IVF is not a consensus position, like being against it in these right-wing spaces. Like many pro-life governors and like I think even Trump has been pretty much like, yeah, like IVF is a good thing. So, and again, I don't want to I don't want to oversell it, but it does seem like for a lot of even some far right people, they're not on board for like this attack on IVF. Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. And I think that's a really important point to make because again, like you said, it's this propaganda, it's these loud voices. But when you sit down, when we met with them, most of them were like, look, you know, they support IVF. They don't support a national bill. Which is a Republican thing, right? Like that's a bipartisan situation, right? Yeah. But most of them were like, he's not they're like, he's not coming for it though. Like we're not trying to ban it, but he's not going to sign a national bill. A lot of them were really open to supporting the military, you know, insurance coverage. Like, and I think it's important that we get away from the screens and face to face, and we have conversations, especially with the election coming up. And for advocacy, I'll just say, get it plugged in with Resolve. We have a great group here in Florida. If you're here in Florida, connect with me. Really the number one thing to do is just meet with your lawmakers, meet with your local people, all the way down to the mayor. Say, hey, where do you stand on this? And if it comes down to it, and a personhood bill is introduced on the state Senate, which is what we are against, that's what we're afraid of, is a personhood bill, which essentially says that life begins at the time of conception, which would give my embryos more rights than I have.
Right.
That's what we're afraid of. That's what we're pushing against. Right now, the good news, to end with some good news in Florida, it doesn't look like that's happening. Right? We're good. We're safe. It doesn't look like a personhood bill is going to be introduced. Our biggest concern here is abortion care and abortion access. So sometimes IVF doesn't work out. And when it doesn't work out,
right.
Unfortunately, the medical care that is required for a failed IVF is the same as the care that's required for an abortion.
Right.
And so we're having to make very real decisions for those of us in Florida, like, okay, we can still do our transfer here, but what if something happens, then where do we go?
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So it's still an issue, but I will say that there's hope, right?
Yeah.
Like, and now there's a lot of hope. So I'm glad that you asked that question though.
Well, that's good, because I even though folks who listen to the show know where we stand and how against Christian nationalism and the far right media, Christian conservative world we are, pragmatically, wherever we can find slivers of agreement on anything, I want to be like, yes, okay, let's high five on this and just sign this thing into law. So I'm all about working with whoever we need to codify again some kind of national protection for folks seeking IVF. I will also say too, and I'm saying this on every show, really until the election, if you are not registered to vote, register your butt to vote. I'm putting a link in the show notes going forward for every single interview that we do. Register to vote. Your vote matters. Your vote counts. If you want to see the change, one way of being part of the change is registering to vote and voting not only in federal elections, but in local elections, right? See what the candidates think about IVF and what they want to do with that, and if they want to protect it or if they want to criminalize it. There are people out there who do want to criminalize it. We need to be aware of these things. So please, if you're listening to my voice right now, register to vote. I implore you to do so. It's the least you can do to participate in the system that we have, as imperfect, and we all know it's imperfect, as it is. So, Allie, it was great having you on the show, giving very much a personal experience of your own journey, all the way really from purity culture all the way through IVF, right? And we covered all the stuff. If folks want to learn more about your work and maybe seek advice, even though you're very clear you're not a doctor, but you are a doula, where can folks find you?
Yeah, so I'm most active on social media, of course. On Instagram, you can find me. It's just my name, Alexandra C. Hamrick, Hamrick. And in that profile, you'll see a link to my doula services as well. I am pretty much a full-time fertility, bereavement, and birth doula. So I'm here to support you no matter how it turns out. And on top of that, I'm an advocate full-time as well. So we, meet with our lawmakers. And I love what you said about voting, because it's the local ones that will make the decision for us and for family building. And as I mentioned, resolve.org, one last, gas them up. They actually have made like a scorecard on their website. So you can go to your state, go to your district, and see where people stand, how they have voted. Have they voted yes? Have they voted no? What did they say to us? Like, all of our notes are there. You can really get a good picture. So I'm working with my Florida group to put together some resources prior to the election here to kind of give people a good understanding of where people stand. But for now, go to their website. It is just a plethora of information.
Great. Love it. Allie, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll talk in the DMs.
I hope so. Thanks, Tim. Have a good day.